Okay, I'm going to talk about transmission fluid for a few minutes, and there's a lot more to this, so I'm not going to promise to you to cover all the bases of transmission fluid. I will tell you by the next meeting that we do, I'll have some stuff in writing for you to look at some things to get a real handle on talking to your accounts about transmission fluid. Here's the reason. It could be said without exaggerating that the most complex piece of equipment in an automobile is an automatic transmission. It makes the engine look like a simplified block of steel. The newest transmissions have 6, 7, 8 gears in them. They have intricate clutch packs, and if you don't know what that is exactly, you have rotating disc. They have an abrasive, if you will, in order that when they come together, they catch, like a clutch. But there's a pack of these wafers, and when the hydraulic pressure brings them together, boom, then it turns the shaft, okay? So you have clutch packs, you have steel metallic gears that are the same as they are in a manual transmission. They're good sized gears, except they're set up in a system called a sun and planetary set. You know how we have the sun, and we have all our rotating planets. Well, they have a central gear, then they have gears on the outside like planets, and they rotate them in and out to change the ratios that you get called the gear sets we have. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8 gears now. Very complex. You have bearings inside this transmission that support all these moving parts. And then we turn around and tell this same fluid it's got to act as a high-performance hydraulic fluid in order to change the pressures in pushing these things around, pushing, pulling, and moving gears inside the transmission, all by hydraulic pressure. And then I tell this fluid, oh, you have to be very specially formulated so that when these clutch packs come together, they either shift with a hard impact shift, which Honda wants, or a very light, slippery thing that Ford and GM want. So I got these chemicals in here that, for lack of a better term, we'll just call them grabbers. They're actually friction coefficients to make these clutches perform in a certain function. It's why sometimes when you change transmission fluid, you thought you had the transmission starting to slip a little, the person who doesn't change the fluid all of a sudden doesn't slip anymore. Because the actual additives in the transmission fluid make the clutch engagement firmer. They hold them together. So I'm asking this fluid to be a hydraulic fluid, to be light enough to function quickly as a hydraulic fluid. It's also got to operate in the torque converter, which is a big heavy-duty hydraulic pump, is what it is, a main axle pump. And I want it to lubricate heavy-duty loaded gears. I mean, these gears are just as big. Imagine an Allison transmission that's in a truck. That automatic transmission can be in a bus. So the gears that are in these automatic transmissions are just solid steel gears, engaging just like you shifted in your transmission. But a lot of those transmissions I used to shift in, right, they all had gear lube and different things. This just got this lightweight, and I say lightweight, less than a 20-weight oil sitting in this thing, okay? Then I hook this up and decide, well, you know, the next thing I'm going to do with this oil, this transmission is going to run at an average of 200 degrees because I hook it right up to the radiator, and the radiator thermostat is at 200 degrees these days, and I run this oil out here, quote, to cool it. This is going to equalize with the radiator. So it comes back to my transmission, and my transmission is running on at 200 degrees. So I'm trying to run less than a 20-weight oil at 200 degrees and have it do all of these functions, live long and prosper, right? It is the most difficult lubricating product in an automobile. And the reason I bring all this up in this context is today, over the past couple weeks, I've had the joy of running into transmission fluid, which is as bad as the one-armed bandit. And people are receiving this stuff, and it's going in their cars because the company selling it is basically claiming it's a universal synthetic transmission fluid. It does everything.
They would have new Wolf set,
no, I won't name it because I don't want to. That's not the purpose. Is actually to name it. I'll tell you guys off camera what it is, but not for the video. This product cannot be a universal transmission fluid. You can't do it. Why can't you do it? Let me give you an example. Chrysler ATF Plus 4 has a minimum spec of 7 on the viscosity scale. Can't be below that and qualify as Chrysler ATF plus 4. Toyota WS has a maximum of 6. Can't be above 6 or it can't be Toyota WS. Now I can't bring you a drum of oil and tell you that it meets Chrysler ATF plus 4 and Toyota WS in that same drum. They're mutually exclusive. One's lowest level is a full unit higher than the other one's highest level for viscosity. It can't be done. And there's multiples of those. And yet, you look at this tech sheet that's given to these shops from this oil company making this stuff, and it says, yep, universal. Now, here's the key word, and this is what I want to tell you guys to look for. Here's what it says. It doesn't say it meets Chrysler ATF plus 4. It doesn't say that it meets Toyota WS. It says that it's suitable for use in these applications. And it turns out that suitable is not a legal term. Suitable says, yes, it can be suitable for anything. Doesn't mean it meets the spec, doesn't mean it's really going to work, but it's suitable. Okay, and then to make a further covering of the tail, they give the dealer a sheet that shows all the viscosity levels that it doesn't meet. So they think, oh, well, they're telling us here, they're being, oh, that's good, so that's okay, they show, well, they don't understand the reason they're giving them the sheet is when they come back later to sue them because the product wasn't right, they're going to be able to say, I advised you it didn't meet all those specs and I only told you it was suitable. It's not my fault that you should have objected if you didn't think it was any good. So it's like a con going on. And this stuff is cheap. So in some of your shops, when they come around, they're going to just wow them with this cheap fluid that's good for everything. When it first came, it said it was good for CVT in the same container as ATF.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and then they got challenged on that, and they backed off and said, well, probably you shouldn't use it in CVT. There's some complaints about that. What do you mean? It's either good or not good. You can't say it was good for CVT and then it's not. Let me tell you, there's no regular ATF, Mercon, Dexron, WS, Chrysler, that can be used in a CVT transmission.
Talk about CVT or CVT?
Constant velocity transmission, CVT.
They're coming.
Well, no, CV, that's fine, but the fluid cannot, it's not the same.
No.
The actual friction coefficients and the things that you have to put into the CVT fluid is more like an oil than a transmission fluid. It's like a heavier oil. You might be better off running 1540 heavy-duty diesel oil in a CVT than ATF. It would probably do better, okay? So here's the point. This stuff is outrageous. And these guys are taking away good business from people like Amsoil, Valvoline, Castrol that make reputable transmission fluids, and these guys are sneaking around the corner selling this stuff, okay? It's made right here in Florida, okay? And it doesn't meet the specs. Now, when you talk to, I went online and did a bunch of research. You go to Toyota in particular, or Honda, and you get onto their talks or their, blogs and stuff like that. And here's a pretty simple thing. Toyota requires a fluid that meets the Toyota WS spec. And what they mean by that, it meets all the specs of the WS, including the viscosity, the chemical additives, all this stuff. So you can't claim you meet or you're even suitable for Toyota's application because they are very, very specific on WS. When you go to Ford, Mercon, LV, they tell you that if you're using regular Mercon in an LV application, warranty's dead. You completely avoided everything. They don't care what happens. You bought it, you own it, you do what you want with it, you put the wrong fluid in. These companies are draconian on transmission fluid. Either you do it right or they have nothing to do with your warranty. And you got companies running around here selling this stuff like this. Now, it's outrageous, and I'll give you some more detailed facts on some specifics and how to deal with this and how to talk to people when we come back in a month. But I had to bring it up to you just to let you know that this stuff is going on because it's outrageous. And the consumer, all of us are consumers in many things. It shows you just how well we are protected by the Consumer Protection Department in the state of Florida. we might as well have two guys, as we used to say in the Navy, two skivvy wavers out there waving at a battleship as it's going by. These guys aren't accomplishing anything. There's no protection because these products should not be able to be sold like this. It isn't a matter of whether, and I'm telling you, the shops that get them, they're buffalo. It's not that the shop thinks they're doing something wrong. They don't understand the nuances here. This is suitable for this, although it doesn't meet any of these specs, but it's suitable, right? They don't see the difference, so they're being taken to the cleaners. And they shouldn't be because the state Consumer Protection Agency should have a little more teeth and look at these things. In Indiana, just about 6 weeks ago, a chain of quick stop type gas station, quick stop stores and so forth, ran into a problem because in Indiana they have a group, and they have them in a lot of states, that just goes and takes a few bottles, takes them with them, they pay for them, they take them into the lab and test them, right? Well, in Indiana, they went into this quick lube chain at several different places, actually, it turned out, because they had to make sure, and they bought 530, 1030, 1040, and 2050 motor oil. Took them all back to the test lab, right? And tested them. They were all the same. It was the same stuff in each bottle. It was neither five, actually it didn't meet any. It was neither 5W30, 10W30, 10W40, or 2050. It was somewhere in between. It was like what they call wash oil. And that's the oil they wash out of the fill lines when they get ready to train over. This was like wash oil. It didn't mean anything, yet it was labeled perfectly on the label of what it meant. It had a little donut there and all this kind of stuff. It looked really great. My point of bringing this up is they hammered these guys. They found the company, fined them, it was some huge fine, and told them they had to remove all the oil that they had made. They had to recall all the oil. So they did. In a matter of 24 hours, they declared bankruptcy and disappeared. Okay? Because they knew what they were doing. And they just declared bankruptcy and disappeared. So all their oil got returned. Party was over. Here's the point I'm making. This is a kind of an interesting aspect of timing because we haven't seen this kind of chicanery, this kind of stuff going on in quite some time. In other words, the API and a lot of guys have pressed pretty hard to have quality control and licensing and all this kind of stuff. But apparently, we have some groups that think that as long as you can get away with this stuff, you just get away with it. And if you get caught, you use the old business practice of, I'm out of here, bankruptcy, everybody take your cut and leave. Right?
Cockroaches.
Well, and the thing about it is, I found out that the requirements of testing and certification, there's a voluntary thing that's set up, believe it or not. 29 states are doing it, where, like Indiana did, they're doing random sampling and they're doing this stuff as a participation. It's not required, but as a participation, because see, only the federal government can require this through all the states. So the API set up this voluntary program to test things. You will be glad to know and impressed with the fact that Florida declined. Okay, so here in Florida, there's no telling what might show up. So my point is, for the consumer, guys that see this on YouTube, I wish you'd all buy Amsoil, but you don't. You don't have to. But what you do need to do is buy an oil that a company has enough of a name and a reputation that can't afford to lose it. You buy from Valvoline. Valvoline has a long time reputation. They're not going to make junk and lose their reputation. Neither is Castrol, neither is Havoline, none of these guys. But when you find something that you don't recognize the label, and you've never heard of such a thing, you know, Smitty's oil from Texarkana or whatever it is, all right? Look at that and decide that's a nice novelty that somebody should put on their shelf as something odd. Don't put it in your car. Don't put it in your car. It would be nice to tell you that every state was hard on this, the Consumer Protection Agency was protecting you, and that you wouldn't get burned. But it's just not worth it. And if the oil's too good a deal to believe, it's too good a deal to believe. It's probably just junk. And in these modern cars, all of us in here, we know these cars are really fantastic. I mean, Marty bought a new Ford pickup, fantastic pickup. These things are now manufactured to quality controls and standards that nobody ever even thought of 25, 30 years ago. And you go out and buy one of these really fine, beautiful automobiles and then put some unknown camel waste in it for oil. Okay?
Could be a lot of that here.
I mean, come on. Do your own homework. When I was talking about the transmission fluid in this case, you go in to have your transmission fluid done. What you should do is ask the service shop. These are good guys, they want to do the right thing, but have them bring you out what they're going to put in your car. If they've got it in bulk, if it's in drums or something like that, so could you show me the paperwork on what this is? If they can't show you the paperwork on what it is, then say, I'd like to get my transmission oil done by the quart. Just show me the quart bottles going in my transmission. And then you can look at the quart bottle and you can see right on it. And if it says, wow, that's good, that's Mobil 1 synthetic transmission fluid, that's Castrol Syntec, that's Amsoil synthetic transmission fluid, by golly, that's exactly what I want, a high quality product to go in my car. But if they say, well, it's out there in that rusty tank, painted yellow, that's the one we put the transmission fluid in, say, well, I'll decline. I'll take the one over here in the quarts. You can go get it from the parts store if you want and bring it in, but I want the right stuff. Because once the bad stuff goes in a transmission, here's the point. You drive down the road, you don't know the difference, boy, the transmission's working just fine, right? Unfortunately, what you don't realize is that the wrong friction modifiers that are in there are causing those wonderful friction plates that work in your clutch pack to just be gradually wearing. You don't see much of that, seems to shift okay. But that little dust it's making gathers with a little bit of oxidation because the fluid wasn't really synthetic, it was some other junk, and so it's got a little oxidized. And that joins with the varnish. Then got a little dust and a little varnish, and it gets into a tight little porting hole, so the pressure that's supposed to go through there is not exactly what it should be. And all of a sudden the pressure that's supposed to go on the clutch pack, instead of being several hundred pounds, is a couple hundred pounds below what it should be. So when the clutch pack comes together, it doesn't have quite the force. So it spins a little. Makes a little more dust. I'm starting to create a regular cascade system here. I'm generating dust. The dust is collecting with the varnish is getting in the ports. Pretty soon, I don't make enough pressure to close the clutch pack and the car won't move. It's slipping in one of the gears, and I wonder what has happened here. You know, fluid's still pink, looks pretty good. What's going on here? It had the wrong friction coefficient for the designer. See, the designer of the transmission, Honda, Nissan, Chevy, Ford, they decide how much slippage they want on those plates when they come together. They spend a lot of money designing this stuff. And so when they figure that out, they put a spec over in the transmission fluid that says this is what we have to have for friction coefficient to get these plates to operate just like we want. Along comes Smokey Joe saying, oh, this is the best suitable stuff you can find since I was selling snake oil out on the plains of Kansas. This is the best stuff in the world. And you stick this stuff in there, and you don't know that transmission, if you treated it right, would have lasted you 500,000 miles. In 75,000 miles, it's spinning all over the place, and you're facing a $2,500 repair bill. So nobody can take care of your car but you.
Kenny said the new CVTs are unrepairable, they're going to be $5,000.
Well, and another thing is about in these new hybrid cars, okay, they're going to have lubrication for these electric motors and stuff in these things, right? It's going to be required eventually when they get out to a point where they got 50, 100,000 miles on it. You're going to have to go in and somebody's going to have to service those electric motors. Just put the wrong stuff in there. You see, they don't repair any of that hybrid stuff. It's, oh, one of you, well, that electric motor's out. What's that going to be? Well, the motor's going to cost you $2,500 and we'll put it in for $1,000. The car's only worth $3,000. Yeah, but that electric motor's pretty expensive. So what are you going to do? Hey, you got a tow truck around here? Tow this thing away, right? You have to take care of these things. You got a 4-cylinder engine. It's got a turbo on it. It's direct injected. It's producing 275 horsepower in a 2-liter engine. That would have been a racing engine 20 years ago. And so you're going to pull in and say, hey, I want the cheapest oil you got in here, put it in my car. You can't match these high-performance engines and the things that are coming with the cheapest oil that you can find. That is the epitome of a penny wise and a pound foolish. You just can't do it. And the reason I'm railing about this stuff, and I apologize for being passionate about it, but this is the one thing that you can do for your car that you can actually make a difference. You can't redesign the car, but you can take care of the car. You can do that, and you can do it by being that finicky guy that they hate to see coming into the repair shop, because you're always asking the hard questions. Well, I want this, or what is that, or I don't want those old worn out, ridiculous asbestos brake pads or whatever you put on my car. I want new good ones. I want the real stuff. I want my car fixed right. If you're that finicky guy, you drive one of these American cars for 500,000 miles until you get so tired of it you can't stand it anymore, because they will go on and on and on. But the problem is we just don't take care of them. Ask a person, anybody, when's the last time you changed your automatic transmission fluid? You changed that? That's a requirement? When would I do that? When's the last time you had your brake system flushed and refilled, right? Brakes? They have fluid in them? When do you do that? What I'm saying is that pay attention to your car. It will really treat you well. These things are very well manufactured. They're very high performance, very high quality standards, but you can't put junk in them. And unfortunately right now we're at a bad timing. Anytime you come out of a depression or a recession, you have a lot of people trying to make money any way they can. And so they try to make substandard products and sell them as higher quality products so they can make up for money that they haven't been able to make in a down economy. It's always the same. It's the worst ever in a recession is when you'll get the most inferior things come out. So we're coming out of one. So maybe some of these shysters will be exposed and they will disappear as we come out of this recession. But we've got some people selling some junk out there. And the best thing to do is you take responsibility for what goes in your car. You ask for the right stuff. Be real careful about bulk products unless you can actually see what it is, because that can be a problem. But when you see those quarts and they spin off the cap as they're putting them in, you know what was in the quart. It's right there for you. And so that's my best advice. As they say, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.